Yo, hey guys, SmallmouthCrush. I'm sorry for the bad audio. There's a little bit of wind here today. But we're going to be talking about the new Beast Coast Superfly, the Hair Jig. I got one on it here, but we're going to talk about a unique way to fish these jigs. We'll give you a rundown on how I fish them. I'm going to get this little guy in the boat and we'll talk about it. That's all coming up. Well, the first fish of the morning isn't the biggest, but he inhaled this. There we go. I'm using the hair jig in a heavier size than some would use. And I got a little trailer on the back of it, a little Ned rig. And it is very effective. A great finesse presentation. We're going to try to get a few more fish and talk a little bit more about it. Oh, this one went right to it. It's a good one. I was extremely finessey with that presentation. I knew that fish was out there. I let it just sit on the bottom. A little bigger than the other one. Just had it. There we go. Should get another bite, but when I make that cast, I just let it fall and sit there, and I'm going to reel up my slack line. And normally, especially if you're around fish, by the time you reel up your slack, you're going to have a bite. So I'm just getting to the point where I'll start to be able to feel that hair jig, and I'm just lifting real slow to see if there's a fish there. If there isn't, I'm going to give it a little bit more slack, let it sit there for a second, and then I'm just going to shake some slack. I'm shaking the slack so it's just puffing that hair just a little bit. And then I dead stick it again, and I just wait for that little tick. I'm going to shake it, let it sit. A little shake on the bottom, keeping it on the bottom. Let it sit. Okay, we're going to get back out on the water shortly, but I wanted to talk to you about the Beast Coast Superfly, the reason behind bringing this specific hair jig to the market, as well as the different types of techniques and ways that I like to use a hair jig. And so we're going to give you a quick crash course on the hair jig. Hair jigs have been around way, way, way before probably most of us watching this were even born. And they've always produced fish. It wasn't until about 2007, 2008, at least in the region where I fish, which was the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan, Door County, Bay of Green Bay, where we had Canadians and anglers from, I would say, Minnesota region all the way up towards Ontario, towards Lake Ontario and that section. And they would be coming down to Sturgeon Bay, and they'd be throwing these super, super small baits that we could not actually see, what they were throwing. We might have watched them 40, 50, 60 yards in front of us and just wreck the smallmouth. And we had no clue what was going on. It's kind of a kept secret for quite a while. Around, I would say, 2008, 2009, 2010, the secret really got out, and guys were really, really focusing on throwing hair jigs. So they had a little thing going for a little while, even though that's not really something they invented, because hair was being used way before that. It's just something that they really brought to the Great Lakes. So that's kind of the history of the hair jig. And we used to think, it's great, cold, pre-spawn type of a bait to use during that time frame, which it is. But we've come to find out there's many different ways to fish a hair jig, as well as it's not just for early season, pre-spawn season anymore. It's actually something I have tied on year-round, and it's very effective when the water's 38 degrees as well as 78 degrees. It just doesn't seem to matter. It's always a good bait under the right situation. So one of the reasons why we wanted to come out with a hair jig is there just wasn't a lot of mass-produced hair jigs on the market that I liked, okay? This is a tungsten compound, very fine detail, from everything from the head itself to the eyes in the head. It's hand-tied. It's got a very good BKK hook. It definitely hooks these fish, keeps them buttoned up. It's just the right setup, as well as the flow through the water, the way everything's tied. This marabou hair jig is definitely going to be a regular bait in most serious smallmouth anglers' tackle boxes moving forward. Typically, when you're throwing a hair jig, a lot of guys will make a long cast over the target, around the fish, and slowly reel it in. And that works great. That works great when the water's cold. It also works great in the middle of the summer. And a lot of us use smaller sizes for that. 1/16, 3/32, sometimes up to 1/8, depending on the conditions. If you got a little bit more wind, or perhaps you have a little bit more depth, you might want to bump it up. I love throwing the 3/32. That's kind of my all-around size when it comes to a hair jig. You find me a lot of times using straight black. It's just the color I prefer. Although Beast Coast is going to make a wide range of colors. There's also a color called Clutch, which is a little bit of black and purple mixed in. I think that was the actual hair jig I was using in this previous clip. But I was fishing a little bit different. So there's three main ways I like to fish a hair jig. And I don't want to repeat myself too much because we do have a few more clips I'm going to add in moving forward. But let's recap that first series of clips that you saw. I took a 3/16 ounce hair jig. I paired it with a piece of plastic, and I threw it out to fish that I saw in my electronics or with my eyes, and I just let it sit there on the bottom. Very, very little movement. Dead sticking for quite a few seconds, and then just real lightly giving it a shake on semi-slack line just to fluff the hair a little bit and maybe bump that along the bottom just a little bit. And then I proceeded to continue to dead stick it. That's a really, really good technique. That works year-round. It's September right now when that video was made, and I caught some good fish on it. I guess my recommendations with that is use any type of finesse plastic that you have confidence in, as long as it pairs well with the hook that's on this hair jig, and get out there and try it. It will catch fish. That can be a small swim bait. It can be a little Ned rig. It could be some sort of craw. Whatever, experiment. You know what I mean? I'm not through experimenting. I was just throwing a little general on the back of that, but there's a lot of different baits that I could have chosen and still probably have caught some fish. I like to pair the trailer with the color of the hair jig somewhat, and so I did go with the powder black color on that specific bait that I used as a trailer. Okay, the other way, in the standard way, is you just cast it out and you do a slow retrieve. 1/16, 3/32, 1/8. Depending on how deep you are, you count it down, and it's a slow, steady retrieve. That puts fish in the boat as well. That's a technique we'll always be using. And I think I talk about the rod, but I have a really specific, it's a St. Croix Legend tournament. It's a 710 medium light, extra fast. It's their hair jig rod. And I got 5-pound Cortland master braid on it. It's really important to have the lightest braid that you can get away with on that. 6 or 8 pound fluorocarbon leader, 4, 5, 8 feet, whatever you're comfortable with as far as the length. I use white on my braid when I'm doing a horizontal retrieve. And so I just feel it blends in with the sky, with the water in the sky when the fish are looking up. That I'll run a shorter leader without any problems. One thing one of the biggest reasons why I run a shorter leader is because of the knot. Sometimes I don't like that knot running up through the guides constantly, especially when you're fishing a hair jig and you have to make that super long cast. And so that knot's going to go through the guides quite a bit. Okay, and then the other retrieve, I'm actually going to just play a few clips here and show you how I do that. But that's just basically taking a 16th ounce or a 3/32 or an 1/8 ounce, having it ready to go and visually seeing the fish either with your eyes or the graph in shallower water and pitching that hair jig out towards that fish and not retrieving it at all, just letting it sit there, dead stick it. That's going to be another way, and hopefully we'll explain that in a little bit more detail in this next clip coming up.
All right, one thing I like to do with the hair jig, when I visually see a fish, I like to just throw it out there and let it sit and just wait for that tick. Just like that. Let me walk back here. This is kind of a decent sized fish, but I'm using the St. Croix Legend Tournament rod, and it even says hair jig on the handle. I like to use white Cortland master braid 5-pound line. This is a 710 medium light rod. It's got an awesome handle. I mean, it's perfect for this application. Seems like it's taking a while. I mean, he's not huge, he's just fighting like he's huge. I mean, I guess he's big. Big enough. Oh, I turned the camera. There we go. Got the hair jig right in his mouth. And it worked perfect. 3/32, 3/32 ounce hair jig here. Let's get him back in the water. All right, another retrieve with the hair jig is really the standard way of fishing it, and that's just a straight retrieve. And depending on how deep of water you're in, obviously you're going to have to count it down and really let that hair jig get to the bottom because these are so light. Here I'm in 2.5, 3 feet of water, so I'm pretty much engaging the reel as soon as it hits the water. But just a steady retrieve. While I'm doing that, I'm also keeping my eyes open for followers as well as just random fish. If I see a random fish, I just pick this up and cast over to it Let it fall, dead stick. Don't move it. Just let that hair jig sit there as long as you can take it. As long as that fish is still looking at it, really try not to move it. And the bite is just going to be a tick. It's not going to be aggressive at all.
So later in the day, I was just throwing a chatterbait covering water. Actually catch a pretty good one here, but you'll notice I have that hair jig ready to go in case I get a follower.
That's a stud there. That's a big one. Pounder. Chatterbaiting. That was fun. Definitely a fun way to fish. Good chatterbait fish right there. One of my favorite rods for throwing a chatterbait, the St. Croix Legend Glass. This is a 7.2, heavy power, moderate action. If you're throwing a chatterbait in sparse grass or open water, this is the rod. Maybe we're onto something.
Okay, here's an example when having that hair jig ready to go. If you see a fish or you have a follower
Another one
with your bait, I quickly reel that chatterbait in and follow it up with the Beast Coast hair jig, the Superfly.
Ooh, there's one. I see you, buddy. I'm coming for you. I'm coming for you. I'm gonna grab my hair and I'm gonna get you. Oh, there's two of them here. I love this rod. I love this rod for hair. There we go.
All right, that wraps up this video. Final thoughts here. If you're looking at getting some of these Beast Coast Superfly hair jigs, your best bet is going to be at the website for Beast Coast Fishing. I'll have those descriptions in the link below. Also, Tacklewarehouse. You can use that link, and that will take you right to these hair jigs. Bunch of different colors. Bait, that's an unusual color. Looks like bait. That could be great if you're fishing around a bunch of bait fish areas. You see that the fish are chasing bait, or that you think the fish are relating to that bait. That would be a good choice. That clutch, that black and purple, straight black. We got some crayfish colors as well. And really, just try a variety of sizes. At 1/16, extremely light bait. You're going to want to make sure you have on the proper setup to be able to cast that efficiently. But it does have its time and place. 3/32, again, that's kind of my standard. I can use that in 3 feet of water, or I'll fish that down in 10 or 15 foot of water. It really is a great all-around size. 1/8 ounce, I started using, when I first started hair jigs, 1/8 ounce was the deal for me. It's just a little bit easier to cast that. You have a little bit more control when you're fishing a little bit deeper. So that's a great choice. And then the larger size, the 3/16, if you want to get down even deeper, or you want to mess around with that, or if you want to fish it like you would some sort of finesse presentation on the bottom, add a plastic trailer to it, you can. Another thing I didn't talk about, maybe I did. I know I talked about it. Let me see if I talk about how to rig up a little trailer, a little piece of plastic, not a trailer, but just a little plastic on that shank of the hook to give it a little bit more weight. Let me find that clip for you. Bear with me. So one of the things I like to do just to give this a little bit more bulk, so what it's going to do is actually help with the fall of the bait, and it's actually going to give you a little bit more of a casting distance. And these hair jigs actually have a keeper inside here. And what I'm going to do is just take a little bit of a little general, this is black powder, and I'm just going to cut a tiny bit off, okay? And I just take that little piece and I work it up the hook and just pop it right in over that hook keeper like that. So real simple, and it just gives it a little bit more bulk. Okay, that was a hair jig crash course. Beast Coast Superfly. Go get you some of those. Give them a try. What else we got? If you're new to the channel, every once in a while I put out a fishing video, but we do try to go live every Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Please join us. We love seeing the new people in the chat. We got a nice group of anglers from all over the country that join us. My co-host Epic Eric. Sometimes we have guests when I feel like it. Sometimes we just hang out, take questions from the viewers. Open topic. Gets a little crazy at times. Well, we try to have fun. So we would enjoy your company on our next live show, Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on Smallmouth Crush. If you're interested in a guide trip, I do guide full-time on the St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario. SmallmouthCrush.com is where you can find all the information as far as the guiding goes. And that's it. That's it. Let's wrap this thing up. As always, until next time, we'll see you guys on the water.